Hi everyone, I am Annick Schramme and I am the academic director of the Master Cultural Management and Fashion Management at the University of Antwerp. And we are going to have a conversation with three interesting, exciting people who will talk about artificial intelligence from another perspective. So I'd like to give the floor first to Peter Verhezen. And the topic of today is what we understand by artificial intelligence and how it impacts creativity and fashion. So let's start with our basic understanding of artificial intelligence, because nowadays you can't open a magazine or there is an article about AI and how does it impact our lives. So Peter, what is your opinion about that?
Well, thank you very much, Annick, for having me. I'm here a professor at the University of Antwerp in management, and I'm a practitioner on governance in Southeast Asia. And my interest in AI is really from a management perspective, how to implement AI in a business context and how businesses could use AI as a way to automate or augment decision making and how that's affecting, let's say, business. If you ask what is AI, for me, I would define AI as a related, let's say, or like it tries to mimic our human brain. To me, AI is a way of looking at cognitive functions that helps or that leads to particular outcomes that are useful for business. It's all to do with cognition, in my opinion. It's to do with reasoning. It also to do with learning. Again, my colleague Peter will talk about it in a minute, I'm pretty sure. What is quite different from the past is that AI can learn now by itself, something that in computer science, from what I understand, was not possible 30, 40 years ago. I used to have an IT company, but I was not an IT person myself. But so I know that we were programming stuff, but we really had to, anytime we had to change the algorithm, we had to do it manually. And that's a big difference today. And I think that's a whole issue around machine learning, deep learning, and generative AI. So that would be my introductory perspective on how business can use this new technology in a way that it improves decision making.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So you made already the link with the other Peter Hellinckx from, indeed, you are an engineer, and so you are from the technical side. And probably you believe very strongly in the opportunities of AI for the future.
Yeah, of course. First of all, I'm not an engineer, but I'm part of the Faculty of Applied Engineering. And I'm doing research in our research team, MForce, Modeling for Sustainability, about how to use AI to solve problems in a sustainable way. That's what we try to do. What we are not doing is fundamental research on AI. No, we are really focusing on what can we do with AI and how can we make a difference for industry. But your first question was, what is AI about?
Exactly.
And how old is AI? AI is pretty old. If you ask me what is a definition of AI, for me personally, AI is whenever a computer can do something and you can't see the difference with the person doing the same thing, then for me you have artificial intelligence. That is very old because you can do it in traditional programming methodologies like what Peter was talking about, but recently AI is a hot topic. There is a reason for that. The main reason is we have a new age of machine learning. Machine learning is also old, but what machine learning does is instead of programming your algorithm yourself, you look at data, you absorb the data, and the data programs your logic that you want to have. In the early days, that was not possible for one simple reason. We did not have the compute power to do so. We could only do it in very easy things. We could detect the difference between letters in the alphabet, that was possible, but for complex pictures and so on, it was difficult. Now we have the compute power, and based on data, the machine can learn that. So that's the big difference. Machine learning is part of AI, and that is the new big thing, the deep learning, as they said. And what is it? If you dive into that, and people might be disappointed, but it's just a mathematical function. And the mathematical function has an input and has an output, but it's a very complex mathematical function. And the cool thing is that we create that function by tweaking it based on the data we feed it, and that's what we call learning. And it's more or less how we learn as well. It's different. If you ask a doctor, they will say it's different, but it works a bit like our brain. We work with pulses, and the more pulses we get to certain areas in our brain, the wider that transmitting connection gets. That's what that thing does as well in the computer. The more a certain neuron in that network triggers, the more important it becomes in that entire network. And for me, that's what AI is about. It's just mathematics.
Yes, but how does it impact on our lives? Yeah, and you heard more and more about generative AI. Is that then the same as deep learning, or how do we have to understand that?
Yes, well, generative AI is about it's in natural language processing. It's a specific domain when you talk about language, and there you use deep learning techniques in a special way. I won't dive too deep into that, but there is a special methodology where you train networks based on a lot of data. We know ChatGPT, we all know it. It's a good thing that it is there, because now people understand that AI is important, so that's good for me. What does it do? It gets input. It's a sequence of words which it will do some kind of interpretation in. Okay, this is a question, what do you ask? And then it tries to create a combination of words that comes as close as possible to what a potential good answer could be. It does not know the answer to your question. It knows what an answer should look like, and it tries to mimic it as good as possible, which means that in most cases, the answer is also correct. But that's what you should keep in mind. It has a structure, a question, and it creates, based on all of what it learned, an answer that resembles as good as possible a possible answer to that question.
But of course, it's a learning machine. So the knowledge and the answers become more and more complex by more and more combinations, I guess. So the fear of a lot of people is that the machine is becoming so intelligent that it even is beyond the human brain. Will that ever happen?
In my opinion, the answer on that is easy. Either there is like a big disaster and it will never happen, or either it will happen, but don't ask me when. But it will happen. We evolve. We learn new things. The technology will evolve, and somewhere in the future it will reach the point that it can do the same things that we do. But what we see right now is that it is very good in certain things we are not good at, and the other way around. For example, a context for a machine learning algorithm is very difficult to understand. If you play like a computer game in Blue, you have to train it a lot, and then it will play it very well. We as well as humans, we play that computer game in Blue, we will play it very well. If we then switch to green, we will play equally good, and the machine has to learn again. It's not entirely true, because there are techniques to solve that, but we see that there is a lot of differences there. But if we play chess, we can't play it as good as a computer, because there is a structure there with data it has. It can think way further ahead than we can do. So yes, it is better in some things. No, it is way worse in other things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does it make sense, Peter, that whatever AI does right now is still very narrowly defined? You gave the example of chess. The reason I'm asking is that there is some studies by Boston Consulting Group and MIT, and what they did was, when they were looking at, and that's a little bit on your alley, Shayli, is that when they're looking at product design, and the individual was not a master, with the use of generative AI, it was able to improve its performance with 41%. Whereas, if you had a master, skillful artist, let's say, in product design, that percentage was much less. And so the benchmark was basically depending whether you had a real expert or somebody that started. And a starter, he benefits more from generative AI than an expert. But coming back to the issue that you mentioned earlier, you think that from an intelligence perspective, AI will be able in the future to be as good as a human being. The problem, though, that I have with that statement is anything that has been done before, yes, but anything that is so novel that is not in the database, how can the generative AI then come up with something? And that was also in that, was it now, in that experiment with Boston Consulting Group, that if we were talking about business solutions, that when the individual used it, not an expert manager, but somebody who used it, he improved the decision making. However, when an individual using an expert using generative AI, the performance was negative. And the reason for that was, as you said, the context is always important in a decision in management because of the complexity. And there, generative AI was not very useful. And so my question is that not a little bit not in contradiction, but and that's related to the issue of creativity, of course, which is also part of what business is about. Isn't it not too optimistic to think that AI will take over most of the human tasks, cognitive functional tasks?
On the long term, I think we are very intelligent and that we will evolve and that even the help of AI will speed up that getting better and stuff. So I think on the long term, we will get there. It's like we got to the moon and we will get to Mars as well. That's something we know it will happen somewhere in the future, but we don't know when. I disagree with the fact that it won't do better for people with a lot of knowledge. The chess example is a very good example. It can play better chess than whichever player we saw in history and we will see in the future. So it can learn better. The main thing in the experiment there, I think, it's just something I think, is that it won't have enough data. And if you don't have enough data to see the right correlations between different actions, then it becomes very difficult. And of course, people with not a lot of experience will benefit more because the support they have is higher. Some correlations that the AI sees, an expert already knows as well, so that's what he naturally would do. And that's also another thing, and it's very important. I think we certainly in the following multiple years, we will need experts, because if we want to train those algorithms faster, we need to try to transfer that domain knowledge from the brains of those people to the AI and not doing it purely on experiment, because we will need millions of experiments compared to just a couple of insights of a certain expert to feed it to the algorithms.
But are you saying that data can give solutions? Because some of the scientists claim with big data, you look at patterns and there it will lead to solutions. Don't we always presume a model in which data play a role?
No, I think knowledge will make the difference, and knowledge has different forms. And I think a model is a form of knowledge because it describes what something looks like, but data as well. And data we can transform into a model. AI is a model. But if we can combine both, then we have more knowledge. And the more knowledge we have, the better results we can get. That is how I see it. And that domain knowledge is easily transferred into a mathematical model, for example, and that you can feed to your AI, and there you can go way faster.
Which is more difficult in business, because it's not narrowly defined.
I don't know. I'm not an expert in there, but I would presume that some basic characteristics you could describe and feed that to a network first, and then add the data later, and then you have, again, more knowledge added to the AI.
Okay. Guys, I think it's time to move forward and to go to our third guest, Shayli. She brings in the discussion something very interesting. She's a designer, a creative, and she's into fashion technology. But the question is, and that's my first question to you, Shayli. Do you think AI is a threat for creativity, or does it feed creativity? What is your opinion?
I think it depends very much on who you are, what your practice is. I know that for a lot of creatives at this moment, it really presses up against a lot of people personally, because creativity is often part of one's identity. And if you're in the artistic practice, it's a lot of about your own emotions or about your own interpretation of life. So when you're challenged with a tool that is threatening your position potentially as an artist or creative, being able to show the ability to perhaps replicate that, it does call into the question your identity, not only your practice, but who you are as a person. But on the other hand, I do know a lot of people who, for example, are perhaps in writing very creative, but haven't had till yet the capacity to visualize what they see in their mind until now. So I also have several contacts who have really hit the ground running with things like generative AI, because they've been able to visually explain how they're thinking or what they're seeing when they write or when they conceptualize. So for some it's a blessing, and for others it's a curse, and there's definitely a lot of debate around that in the creative space right now.
Yes, and you have your own fashion company, so you started a company in digital fashion. So maybe you can tell a bit more about that. How does it work for you then, and how do you deal with digital fashion and AI?
Yeah, for the past 3 years, my startup Mutiny has been very experimental in the digital fashion space. So exploring a lot of new technologies with avatar skins, hologram fashion shows, 3D printing, augmented reality, and more. And so naturally, AI comes up in that space, in the innovation space. And for me, initially, a lot of the hype has been around things like ChatGPT and generative AI. And I think it's similar to what you were saying about it being not necessarily beneficial for the expert, but beneficial for someone who is new to learning these skills. For me, I've developed my writing skills, and I've also developed my visualization skills. So I initially found a lot of that tooling a little frustrating, because the output was never what I needed, or what would it would take me more time to be able to get the outcome I wanted from those tools than it would be to just do it myself. But for me, actually, as a creative, the real benefit from AI is actually in the more mundane business-related tasks, like using fireflies in my meetings to translate calls, to track different data with marketing and sales and things like that, because that's the skill set, or that's the knowledge that I don't have as a creative, and that is the type of skills that creatives really need to be able to succeed. So for me, it's always been about trying to find and fill the gaps in your skill set rather than necessarily boost what I already have. So
interesting. Yeah. So it's more related to the other tasks that are necessary to start a business. But does it influence your creativity as well?
Yes and no. For now, I've used it a few times visually, and I think when you need to like churn out a lot of visuals frequently when it comes to Instagram and things like that, there's a real need to constantly put content online. It's been helpful in that regard rather than me jumping on Photoshop or Illustrator and having to kind of manually do that myself. I have had a good play and thrown out some nice images. But other than that, in terms of the way I work creatively, I haven't built it into my workflow yet. And it does feel like it needs a good amount of like my own time investment to be able to really figure out how I can use it to my creative advantage. Because like I said, right now, the kind of time and effort needs to be balanced for me. If it's quicker for me to do myself, I'm likely to take that option. I have to carve out a space to really invest in it at this point.
Yes, okay. So it's another source of inspiration also maybe, but can AI exhibit authenticity also that is similar to humans, you think? And what does it mean then for your own intellectual property rights?
That's a really hard one, and I know that because the generative AI is picking from all previous imagery and online imagery, the work of other creators and artists. There's a lot of pushing up against the IP aspect involved, and there are some cases. I know some people are getting sued here and there. I think that's really coming into discussion now. Being from fashion, though, that's always been the case. The likelihood of getting ripped off has always been very high, and it's something we do take as a given. But I think at this scale, when you're kind of, it's different when it's like some fashion brand from somewhere else has taken inspiration from your work and posts it online. But it's different when the whole world has access to your name to be able to generate a vision like yours. I mean, in the beginning, there was all these like Wes Anderson generative images coming out, and people kept putting in a lot of names like that and coming out with their own imagery. So if you've kind of made a name for yourself, then I think your aesthetic and the kind of characteristics that you built for yourself as an artist can be handed over essentially to the world to replicate, which I think some creatives embrace it and say, here's my content, go for it, and use it as derivative content that will drive more visibility to yourself and your aesthetic. But then others find it really a theft. So there's definitely, again, two ways of looking at it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But what do you think society should do, or how politics should deal with that? Because indeed, it could also, if there are rules about protecting your intellectual property rights, and maybe it also limits your creativity as well, because and of others. Because are you in principle for open innovation and for?
I've always found it kind of interesting, the idea of COO, or offering derivative rights to your community to generate their own content and riff on your own aesthetic in their own unique way. In a way, it's kind of building a community around your work, and also taking inspiration from those who find you inspiring or really gel with your aesthetic. But that's kind of a space to be tested. Not many brands or not many IP holders feel comfortable with that. There's a lot of discussion around that in the kind of blockchain and Web3 space, using the NFT as an IP right. And then those who bought the NFT would be able to create their own brand or content or derivative experiences around the IP that they had purchased. So there's been a lot of test and play in the NFT space, and I know there are a lot of people who felt that blockchain was a good solve for tracking the IP of certain content. But again, that's a space that's still evolving, and there's a lot yet to be proven. So I'm not really sure in terms of government or the higher ups how this should be handled, because it's all new territory.
Exactly. Yeah, and the law is always running behind.
Yeah.
So from a business perspective, so you can use AI also for expressing your creativity and even be more crazy creative. But yeah, what do you think as a businessman, if you hear that, is that possible
Well,
to
first
make
of
out
all,
a business?
there are two perspectives. Usually, business can be creative and should be creative, but when we talk about art, and we had the discussion before, I believe that AI can be creative to a certain extent, but I distinguish three forms of creativity. There is this kind of combinatory creativity where you bring in different styles. You can have also explanatory, where you basically bring elements that you enlighten with your own subjective experience. And then there is transformative creativity, which leads to art with capital A. And what I mean by that is you're sitting as an artist within a certain traditional paradigm or a culture or a tradition. And from there onwards, you bring in your own existential, subjective experience that leads to a piece of art. And if you're looking, just a famous piece is, of course, L'Inde Demoiselle from Picasso, which was the start of Cubism. That I don't think AI could have done, because it was breaking with the tradition, with data that were part of that cultural tradition. And therefore, I think AI is not able, and I don't see that happening anytime soon, that AI can beat a great artist with that kind of transformative creativity. And second, as Peter was saying earlier, it's augmented, or it is intelligence. To me, art has a soul, is something that's to do with the self-consciousness of an artist. And consciousness, something that no neuroscientist has ever seen in the brain yet. And Penrose has some interesting stuff on that one. So to me, it's still very uncertain how to see how AI can compete, if you like, with great artists. That would be my thing. But your question was about business. Business will use it, and Shayli, you referred to it already. We see that in sales, how to personalize a product to a person. We couldn't do that before. With AI, we see that possibility of personalization definitely in a cost-effective manner. We see that with product design. We see that with certain decision processes that are narrowly defined, where there's so much power available and data available that you don't have to look at that. So there's definitely a lot of applications that business is looking at. But there is a big but. It are the big boys, and I mean by that the Googles, the Metas, Microsofts. They have the money, because building an AI application, especially now with generative AI, it's quite costly. The algorithms that is using this kind of foundational models and the data trained to get into that kind of, startups will have difficulties to compete with the big shots. And my worry is that from a business perspective, how is innovation from smaller players going to be able to compete with those organizations that are protecting their IP, obviously, and they have the first user advantage. Everybody knows ChatGPT. There are other generative AIs in the market, but it seems that Microsoft is a little bit, and Google, these two, they are ahead of the pack. And from a business perspective, how are you going to build applications on top of somebody else's proprietary system? That's always a little bit tricky. So I think those organizations are ahead at the moment using AI, and but we're still in a very initial phase. I'm not too worried, but my worry is more, how you create competition when those bigger organizations are really dominating the field. And so yes, I know you can build applications that will be useful, but the cost of big data, the cost of this computer power, I think last year Google or Microsoft itself, just for the GPUs, spent $9 billion just in 1 year, just for that microchip. And so can you imagine a startup? How are we going to compete with those? So that's an issue, I think, which will unfold and evolve. And but I'm definitely a fan of AI, but with a big caveat. And we talk about creativity, the gut feeling of an entrepreneur, seeing an opportunity. I don't think AI will be able anytime soon to replace that kind of gut feeling, whatever the gut is, the intuition or whatever you want to call it, because that is so complex, the way our brains function, that AI is not yet able to copy, mimic that. What they're beating us in, I think, is with big data. But again, Peter, you know more about this than I do. I see the applications, the output, let's say. But what I do see is that human learning is still superior at this moment than machine learning. And the reason is that our learning is not just intelligence, but has to do with other factors. Communication, language skills, understanding models, understanding why we do things. And that's exactly what business is. The reason that, and that's been proven in that experiment, business is very complex, it's very ambiguous. And I think, mathematics, and I would like to hear you, Peter, on that one. Mathematics is +1, programming-wise. How do you deal with ambiguities? And so that's where experienced managers and entrepreneurs, in the ambiguity, they see opportunities. And that's what makes a great business person. He's not afraid of crises, he's not afraid of ambiguities, on the contrary. That's where they thrive. And that's exactly similar how artists deal with issues, I think. And to me, at the moment, but I could be really wrong, AI is wonderful in terms of a known field, a known domain of expertise. They will beat a human easy. But when you combine things and you transform or you do things that are unusual, I don't see yet how AI will, but yeah.
I mean, I'd just love to add to that because, for me as a fashion designer and many artists too, a lot of the output is a reflection on the spirit of the emotions of our time. So it's a timely response a lot of the time, or an emotional response, a personal response based on your own history and makeup and environment. And that, I believe, requires a level of emotional intelligence. And I wonder if emotional intelligence can be computer generated, because that is still a very ambiguous area for a lot of humanity, but certainly a very necessary part of what makes humans, and in business a huge part of doing successful business. So I wonder, actually, have you looked into that at all?
I think, and I don't have the right answers right now, and let that be clear, because a lot of things still need to evolve. But I'll start with the art. For my easy brain and easy interpretation, what art is about, because I don't know anything about art, but I think there are two different things there. You can build something or make something beautiful. And for me, that's not art. But you can make something unique, expressing what you want to say, and that is art. And the computer will never itself express what you want to say, but a computer can make something very beautiful.
Yeah, but that's a very interesting question that I also wanted to go into, because the three of you are all the time making a difference between the artist and the expression of the artist and the art. And the art from a consumer perspective, maybe the consumer is only interested in the aesthetics and not in the artist.
And that will be the huge difference, I think. But that is also the opportunity. I like in many revolutions, let's call it a revolution, people have to reinvent themselves. I think the unique thing artists have, something I don't have, is that they can show their emotions in such a way that is unique. And a machine will never come up with such a unique methodology. But if you ask them to design a chair or something that most people like, that they will be able to do very good. But that message as such, the emotion that a person gets because it sees what you wanted to express, that will still be unique, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. I like to question that, because on the art market there are already art pieces that are made purely by AI, and people are prepared to pay very much for it.
Yes, but
so because they have an emotion.
somebody at a certain moment wanted to give a message and use AI to create that message.
But I'm not sure if that's what makes it good to the buyer necessarily. It's in the end self-promotion, marketing, your network. What sells the art is not always the art itself. I mean, I'm sure that comes into it. And I'm sure for some people it's more about, you know, the story and the aesthetic and the artist. But I'm sure for a lot of people, especially because art is so much about investment as well, collecting, it is about the profile of the artist and will they, you know, gain value over time and who is in their network. It's really a social space that you play in art, and it's very political in that respect. So I'm not sure that it having a message or coming from a human is necessary to give it value.
But I think we need to make a distinction between art as a way of give meaning to something, to a subjective experience with an objective materiality, because at the end of the day you see something or you feel something or you hear something. Somebody told once art should amaze, amuse and move people. Now what you're referring to, the financial investment perspective, that could be definitely true, but is that directly related to what art is? I don't know, and I don't think so. But what I do agree is that could make an artist a wealthy or not so wealthy person. But what I do think, and that was your question, Annick, is that art becomes art with a capital A in the communication, in the discourse between the artist and the people that are experiencing that piece of art, the audience. So without audience, you don't have art. You have a beautiful piece of a subjective, unique experience.
Expression. Yeah.
It's an expression that the artist gives meaning, but the audience is necessary as well, I think, to get into that kind of network, relationship, communication.
Well, again, I want to play the advocate of the devil. Peter, you said already 2 times, I think, yeah, but I don't know nothing about art. Why is that? Because you think I don't know art history, I don't know the artists who are creating this fabulous art. So you start from a system that is already existing, yeah, and that, suppose a kind of knowledge of the art system. But maybe AI can help in democratizing art creation and accessibility, because you don't need that knowledge anymore in order to appreciate it if it is generated by AI.
I don't know. I still believe that there are really two things. I might buy a chair because it's just beautiful in my living room and I really don't care who made it. But if there is a nice story about a person that had some incredible events in his life and he was able to express that, even with AI, I don't care. But somehow that is very valuable for me as well. And then I don't buy it because I think it's beautiful, because maybe it's really ugly. But at least you have something that has emotions in it.
The soul, yeah. But that's maybe is becoming then even more important in the future. Because,
yes, but then I think AI will be a tool, and AI will never start generating art itself. It will start generating furniture itself because it can optimize it. But art for me, there is somebody who wanted to express something, and that will always be unique, whether there is AI involved or not.
Even if it is an unknown and anonymous.
In my opinion, yes. And with my humble knowledge.
Yes. I have a speculative future idea of how this might look. What if I had an AI system like Cortana or whatever I use through my computer that understands my decision making and thought processes. It understands and learns the way I write. I've fed it all of my visual material. It knows what kind of articles I read, what people I talk to. It knows where I've been. It knows somehow what if I fed it my history. That at some point has certain advantages for it to be able to help me with my decision making, to carry out my daily tasks, etc. But could it learn me well enough to be able to create my art or my creative output on my behalf?
Mm-hmm. That is a very interesting thing that you say there. And then for me, it's just about the interface. If it then can sense somehow how you feel and what your emotions are, and it creates art, and it's your art, because it's what you feel and you want to express that gets out. Of course, it's not you writing down in text what you feel. No, it's directly coming from the sensors, but it's just another interface.
I agree with that. So it becomes a tool, because AI, whether you do that, even I can imagine that thought process, like energy, let's say 100 years from now, that AI could grab that. Then it's still your quote-unquote soul spirit that tries to express and give meaning to it. And AI is the tool that helps you to materialize that. I don't see the subjective experience that the ghost in the machine. I cannot imagine, answering your question, that AI, it can reproduce and mimic what you think who you are, but it cannot replace you. And therefore, to me, and I agree with you, Peter, it's a tool. But that makes me thinking about how our brain works. Our brain intrinsically feels comfortable in a very certain environment. We like predictable and certainty. And businessmen also, they like certainty. But at the same time, our brain seeks continuously to novel things. It seems that we love intoxication of surprise, of novelties. And so it's a balancing act. That's how our brain works. At the same time, we like to have the certainty, the predictability, and the AI could be a very useful tool. And I'm still seeking these kind of special, novel surprises. And I think that's where art comes in, because real art gives us that surprise. It gives us that kind of, it's almost like a drug, to be overwhelmed by that experience of something novel. And in business, we call that exploiting your assets and exploring new opportunities to be able to be ahead of competition.
Yeah, but then your assumption is that AI is always predictable. While what you were saying, and I thought it was very interesting, if I put my own information into the machine, can it produce then something that reflects my identity?
Yeah, I wonder, is it possible for the machine to create newness?
Exactly. Because now you think you say, yeah, no, AI is always predictable. It's
Well, no, for me, AI is basically looking at data, seeking patterns, and that with high accuracy is being able to predict an outcome that we don't know yet. But it's what I call, in that sense, but I could be wrong here, kind of probability thinking, an objective reality. But I don't see how the subjective experience, what you call
That
unique
is the
feeling.
big difference. I think what a computer will do will be deterministic and objective.
Yeah.
So it will, if you give A in, B will come out. It's not entirely true, but at least it's a fixed mathematical function. Our brain does the same, and then we have hormones and we have things cutting around, doing some other stuff with our brain and our experiences and our fears. And then the question is, will we introduce that as well into AI or not? And then we come very close to the fact, is our world deterministic or not? And
Yes.
if it is deterministic, then of course we can entirely do that. If it's not, we can't.
Yeah.
And that's a very difficult question.
Yes.
We don't want to go there.
But and I think that's interesting indeed, because now we are talking about elements that are important for the creative process. And I think there a combination of AI and personal input and emotions, it's already now, I think, in the academy that you use both. That AI can, they use it, but then they add their own, they do something with it. So is that true? That's my observation.
I mean, from
the creative process, how does it influence the creative process?
Yeah, from what I've seen, most kind of practicing creatives use it to build on. I haven't seen many who are happy to present necessarily just the generative piece and call it a day. That I see more from people who are closet artists who might have chosen another life path and said to themselves, well, I've always actually wanted to be a fashion designer and now I get the chance to try that out for myself. Whereas you do see a lot more of the practicing artists add new layers on top depending on their medium, you know. And I think a lot of art, it's a very physical space. It's not, you know, it's not just a JPEG or a PNG. It's a sculpture, it's dance, it's music. So there's a lot of layers involved in crafting those experiences. So, and that I think is really interesting because you get some very interesting interpretations and perspectives on the kind of emotional or personal opinion on what AI is and how it plays into the identity of what it is to be an artist. I remember having a great chat with a group of artists in India about when is your art still your art, because a lot of artists have a team who might in fact make the art for them. At a certain stage, if you're a big enough artist, you have your idea and then you have your team sculpt it or build it for you. So then is it still yours? It wasn't made by your hand anymore. It was only your conception. So I think similarly, it sits in this space of if you conceptualized it, then it is yours and your art. And then how it's manifested or produced then is... it's still your world and your emotional space that's being built. So I
think we are coming to the end because we can continue, of course, but we focused on this relation between creativity and AI. But maybe some last remark about the future and AI and creativity. Each of you, Peter, maybe you can start.
My main worry is not the technology as such. It is the people producing it, manipulating it, controlling it. So it are the humans who have access to AI tools that could potentially misuse it, just the same as with any technology, be it nuclear energy, be it electricity, be it fire, you just name it. So I'm not a pessimist like many people at the moment talking trash about AI. We should stop, and I don't think that's the point, but I think we need to think seriously about where we're going to use it for, and the whole debate around responsible artificial intelligence that we didn't really touch upon today is to me a big concern. And second, AI to me is indeed a tool that will evolve and will be more and more used. But to me, it's that what distinguishes real art, real creativity, if you like, or human creativity, let's put it that way, from artificial intelligence creativity is that combination, that balance of that objective material traditional paradigm that AI could replicate, but the uniqueness of that human being and that subjective experience is what makes it special. And that's a distinction between human intelligence or human consciousness and human making versus an artificial making. And so in that sense, I hope that we will learn to live with AI and that we will use it more optimally, but that we also are aware of the concerns of, monopolistic behavior by some powerful people that could misuse it, or non so benign politicians that could misuse AI for whatever purpose.
But this is almost a kind of philosophical reflection, and I find it very, very useful and also interesting. But maybe you can also say something from your perspective from the business side.
Oh, I would definitely, any board that I meet, I would say you better think about it. The problem is, if you look to boards, about 8% on average in the world today has some AI literacy. The only difference is that in tech companies, about 18% of the board members. So any tech corporation will have 1 in 4 of the board understand AI. If you're going to a retail or other businesses, you have hardly anybody on a board. So how are those people going to make decisions where you can use AI if they don't have an understanding of it? So AI is definitely something that business should embrace. But at the same time, as I said earlier, I see limitations at the moment because we're in a very initial phase, especially generative AI, where it's very useful for sales and product design and whatever you have. It's still very costly. And another concern I have, let's not forget, especially with prompting generative AI, the energy used to get answers, especially when it's getting more and more complex. That is a concern from a sustainable perspective. I'm a big fan, but boards are not ready at this moment, not at all. And I think we should have boards being educated about this. Should come to the university or courses because it is necessary. Because if not, they're going to lose opportunities, and those that will be ahead, the rest will just fail. That is a worry that I have. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Peter Hellinckx.
I totally agree with a couple of things you said. First of all, we all saw what happened with social media and which power it gave people. It will do the same thing with the same companies. So we should be careful on that, for sure. Then the education is very important. And just think back a couple of years. Yeah? Some people were educated in the internet, others were not. And if we see currently which companies are not surviving, it's those people who invested too late in online shops and so on. So optimizing your production and so on with AI, if you don't invest in that, you won't be competitive and you will disappear. That's for sure. I'm a bit more afraid than you are, in a sense that what I see about AI, and currently AI does not control things, so that's a good thing, but that will change. And we don't know yet why it does things, and it's an optimization problem. If that optimization methodology optimizes to something that we don't expect and we don't see, and we can only react too late, and we have a problem. and those problems will appear, and hopefully it will be big enough but small enough, if you understand what I mean, and then we will react. But I think something will go wrong. Last, and that's very important, certainly after this discussion, and maybe a bit where we disagree, people always tend to keep hold on what they were used to. The world has changed. Don't stay towards your philosophy on my craftsmanship is everything that is there. No, it changed. Evolve, embrace the new things, and try to combine it in an optimal way, and then you will be the one inventing the new craftsmanship of the next generation, and that's what you should do. Don't stick to what you were doing before. Look at the amount of bakeries there's still out there. It's not a lot. There is a reason for that.
Yeah, that's also an interesting question for you. How far do you have to integrate AI also in education? Because you said I'm a fashion designer, but it was not in my education. Do you think it's necessary to include that? Because our fashion department of the academy is very well known for the high creativity, but they are not learning that. Or are we now a bit old and maybe young people just do it already as a natural thing, digital borns?
Yeah, I think there's a big push and pull with education. Already in being in the digital fashion space, integrating digital fashion into education, it's still something that most academies, including the academy here in Antwerp, are only willing to kind of dip a toe in at this point, because it's still very foreign. And foreign, I mean to the teaching staff most of the time. It presses up against that feeling of, I guess, when getting a bit older and not understanding all the new things, and if you don't keep up with it. So there's a big knowledge gap between the younger generations who are very digital native and ready to kind of absorb and take on new things and learn new programs, and older generations who, like you said, have done things the same way over and over for a long time. So there's a lot of butting heads at this point, even with technology that's still, in my opinion, old, let alone AI. So yeah, I see it being still years down the line before it's incorporated, and it would need kind of the staff or the teaching faculty to really be open to understanding it themselves and kind of welcome it in with open arms and prepare to be challenged as well. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I think we should repeat the discussion or continue the discussion. That's better, because as you say, things are evolving, and having this discussion between people from different faculties, different disciplines, it contributes to the future and to the new evolution. So thank you very much for this discussion, and hope to see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.